All right, people are still filing in. Everybody wants to talk about GDPR and SOC 2, so but before we talk about that fun stuff, I want to talk about Vanta a little bit, about you a little bit, because your story is different from that of most founders. Just because you graduated and you went to VC, and then you went to found a company. Like, tell me a little bit about that. Why did you make that choice?
Yeah, I think with the caveat on this, a lot of my career stories, I've heard other people's career stories, tend to make sense in retrospect. But at the time, you're just like muddling through and making the best decision you can. So all to say, if I make this sound good, I was muddling at the time. But I think I got out of school, was a kid who liked the internet, was kind of obsessed with Apple Computer in middle school, you know, all this stuff. And so kind of knew I wanted to do something in startups, but wasn't particularly qualified for like kind of anything. And
because you graduated
in economics.
In economics, yeah.
Yeah, which is wonderful, and I love micro, and econ's great, but like not obviously a great, you know, what role do you go into? And it's kind of like, I don't know, like new grad who can hopefully do things sort of roles. Anyway, and then a venture firm in New York, Union Square Ventures, had a blog. One of the principal, the GPs there, Fred Wilson, kept this blog, ABC, and I read it, and he wrote this post about how he wanted the firm wanted like a new young kid, basically, at the firm, because they had this wonderful person named Andrew who's moving on, and so they needed to like backfill Andrew. And I read that post and was like, wow, this seems incredible. I wonder who's going to get the job. Definitely not me. And like kind of went along with my life. And then
Well, you didn't apply?
I did not apply. It was like 2 or 3 weeks. And then at the end of those, I kind of kept thinking about it. And then, you know, it's like, maybe I should, you know, I'm not going to get it, but like, I'll send them some links. The job post was, send us a couple links to your web presence. And so, like, literally the night before the thing closed, I sent them some links and was like, well, now I can stop thinking about it, because clearly that's a dead end here. And long story short, I got the job, which was probably primarily shocking to me. But it was less like, you know, I'm sure like VC sounds really cool and awesome and, I don't know, lucrative or something, but like, did not think that was me. Ended up at this firm that was 5 people at the time, and really wonderful and like great. Fred, Brad, and Albert are all wonderful, and learned a ton. But I think I sat there and got to meet with founders all day, every day, and motly wanted to be them. And my job was great. Like my job was like objectively wonderful. But I kind of didn't want it, and I like grappled with that a little bit, and was trying to, you know, figure that out. I was also a little
Most people would
more
be
angsty.
very happy to have a job in a VC firm like
Yes.
Union Square Ventures.
Yeah, I know. I thought I was like trying to figure out, well, is this just a me thing? Maybe I should just, you know, whatever. Anyway, I think for me, one of the really helpful things on that was part of that job is you meet founders all day long, and like you see this, but there's lots of different types of founder.
Sure.
And that, at least at the time, the media narrative was not that. The media narrative is like, everyone is Mark Zuckerberg, they've been coding since they were 4, you know, they go into their dorm room, they make a thing, 1 billion people use it, like, and if you don't do that, like, you're not a founder.
What media would write that?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely not TechCrunch in 2007. But anyway, I think the really helpful thing was just seeing how many different ways people could do it. And that helped a little bit with the like, oh, I could be a person who does this piece. That was a big part of it.
So you went on to start a startup.
Kind
of lab. It's kind of, you were like, I'm done here.
Yeah, again, gonna tell the story in a more linear way, but than it was in reality. But the other kind of chip I had on my shoulder was I wanted to start a technology startup, and I couldn't code. And lots of people start technology startups and cannot code. And one can do this. But I felt personally I could not, because so much of my confidence comes from like personally just like feeling like I understand something. Again, other people like drive their confidence differently, like it's just a me thing. But anyway, so I quit USV, I took my bonus, I taught myself to code, I made a bunch of stuff. no one has ever heard of or ever used, which was both fun and kind of demoralizing a little bit.
What did you? I've never seen exactly what you made at that
Oh, I do
time.
actually have a list online. The thing I started with was a book website. Like, it's supposed to be Goodreads, but better. Except it was Goodreads, but worse, because I didn't know what I was doing. But that was actually my first project, not because I thought it would be a good business, but because when I would go to my friends' apartments, I loved seeing their bookshelves. And that was just, I wanted to see my friends' bookshelves, and that was enough to push me through, learning minutiae of, CSS or, JavaScript or whatever it was.
Now, from that, you went to Dropbox, and then you decided to leave Dropbox and found Vanta. Now, most people wouldn't say, oh, I really want to go into working on SOC 2 certifications and things like that. What motivated you at the time to get into this business, which isn't, most people would avoid probably if they could?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of the arbitrage of the, Paul Graham calls them the schlep businesses, but it actually is very rewarding to work on something where people have to do it, but they don't want to, and you help them because they end up being so grateful to you. So there's a little bit of that on just kind of a almost emotional level. But I actually think we didn't start with SOC 2 and did not expect SOC 2 to become it's thought to become more prevalent, but it's become much more prevalent than even expected. The original, insight thesis was small companies don't do a lot for their internal security and security of their customer data. Not because they don't care. It's kind of, it's not that. It's because when you have no customers or you don't have enough customers to stay in business, your highest concern is not securing your customers' data. Your highest concern is getting more customers. And so, that's why there weren't companies that, helped startups secure themselves. All the security companies kind of started much bigger companies, all of that. And this is a little bit of the econ background where you're we think about the system and incentives. But then I was okay, well, if you want startups to care more about security, you need to tie that to the thing they care about, which is growth, revenue growth, customer growth. And so how can you kind of make a startup do things to help itself be more secure, but then reward it for that, right? How do you get more customers out of security? And I think compliance actually is that, because the first time you get a SOC 2, you open up, space up market. The first time you go through HIPAA, you can now sell to healthcare companies. These actually are TAM expansion, revenue acceleration. And that's not to say you shouldn't just slap the HIPAA badge on your website and call it a day and start selling to healthcare companies. You have to actually do the work. But if you can couple that work to the reward of new customers, you can get startups to do a lot more security.
Did that work?
It actually has, yeah. That was a thesis. It's funny, I, a couple months ago, for the first time in 5 or 6 years, looked at our seed deck from April of 2018. And it is build a security company starting with startups getting SOC 2, and then building on security tools from there. And you're huh, on some level it went faster than I expected, on some level it's gone slower, but surprisingly, yes.
What were those early days like? I read somewhere that you used to wake up early in the morning every day and write emails to every one of your customers, basically?
Yeah, so there was a lot of, at that point, could code. My co-founder could code, very much could code, much better than I could. But we both built a bunch of things that no one wanted, kind of back to my book website, right? And so we were sort of look, we can, and kind of had them in hubris to be look, we can write, whatever code we want. But the issue is does somebody want this product or this feature, this thing, and who knows? And our intuition's been bad in the past, so don't trust that. Do the thing manually to figure it out, and then go write the code. And so there were a lot of examples of this, but one particularly fun one were these emails where, maybe this day does this, but you can connect your G Suite account and we'd scan and then tell you, okay, who in your company doesn't have two-factor on their email account? You probably want them to have that. And so we would do that, and then I would wake up every Friday morning very early, because for some reason I thought Friday at 6 a.m. was the right time to send this email. Definitely wasn't. But anyway, and manually go look up, and we only had 20 customers, so would manually go look these up and then write people emails and be Hey, Frederick, Christina doesn't have two-factor on, you should probably forward this to her. And and send them off. And then we'd like look a week later and be like, okay, did the list change, right? Like, did the email work? Did it like drive better security behavior? And it mostly did. And then one morning I was like sleep deprived and I like messed up a bunch of the emails. And people actually all replied and were like, hey, your script is wrong, like your code is wrong. And you're like, no, I need more coffee. But like at this point, it probably should be code because like you read it, you looked at it, you thought about it, you realized it was wrong. Like, I mean, embarrassing, but like great signal that someone's using it.
Right. Lots of manual work. And I know you've always been quite frugal as well as a company in those early days. Is that something now you're worth? What's the latest number?
2.245
billion, not million. You still sticking with that? That's frugality?
We try, and it's not. I mean, we joke about Midwestern values or Costco coffee or kind of all these things, but the idea is not starve growth or like be stingy or be annoying. The idea is like very much invest in the places that drive growth, but then like don't fritter away money on the things that don't. Which sounds obvious, but I think having seen a ton of startups over the last, 10, 15 years, it's actually really easy to spend money on stuff that someone wants, it seems reasonable, you don't want to disappoint someone, but like it doesn't actually matter. And then I think if you keep doing that, there's like cultural implications. And so, this all sounds like platitudes, I know, but I think it is a trickier balance. We try to strike it. I think we're more aggressive about what we spend on and what we don't than other companies. Maybe it's the right balance, maybe it's not. We'll know more in a couple of years. Scorecard will come out.
What will you not spend money on that some other companies would, you think?
I mean, I think our offices are nice. I think some people at Vanta, if they were on stage and we gave them truth serum, they'd be like, the offices could definitely be nicer, the offices definitely could be nicer. I think relative to the heyday of your San Francisco tech office in like the late 2010s, our offices are like nowhere near that. And I think there's a balance of like treating people like adults is like another frame and like truly like adults, not like kids, kind of. We'll do food a couple days a week, but like food around get-togethers and or team offsites or like we're together to drive something versus like, I worked at a place that had like 3 meals a day, 5 days a week, and it was wonderful. But like, there probably could have been similar business outcomes with like slightly less Michelin-starred chefs involved.
Sure, those are nice.
Slightly fewer.
They are nice. I'll take them.
Yep.
Talking about business outcomes, when did you realize that you were onto something?
We did probably like to the email story. Like there's kind of versions of that story at different levels of fidelity for, again, 6 to 9 months before I started coding. And so I think it was more of like an incremental get confidence perspective. There was a moment, again, no code was written, like Vanta was all manual, where we'd worked with a couple companies, they seemed happy, and then actually we got an email from a former coworker that basically said, hey, here you guys have become SOC 2 consultants, really weird life decision, we should probably get a drink, and like, I don't know what your life seemed like it was going well, but that's a weird career decision. But before you get that drink, can you come in and help my company get a SOC 2? And there's this moment of like, that felt really good, because you're like, okay, it doesn't make sense, but like, you're still asking for the thing. This is all word, like someone told you, like you were at a San Francisco house party and heard about it, like there's like a strong word of mouth thing here. And it's all manual and you don't care because you just want the outcome. And so there was something where you're like, oh, no, we won't do your company in a spreadsheet, but like we should start writing code such that you could like become a proper customer.
Sure, because in those early days, I'm sure the competition was spreadsheets and other consultants.
And consultants. And the consultants generally were, I think one of the actually big advantages, where the consultants were accountants by training. And so we were going to startup CTOs and saying, hey, do you want to work with like a PM engineer or do you want to work with an accountant on your technical stuff? And that was a great choice to give a startup CTO. Yeah.
Now, where are you today? Because you're not like a consultancy at this point. You've made some decisions that switch the company to something different than that.
Yeah, Yeah, there was just like a brief, we don't talk about this much, but like kind of there was a brief moment there where you're like, maybe this isn't venture backed. Maybe this is just like the world's best bootstrap business, you know, where it's like we're kind of like the consultants, except we understand how technology works and so can like systematize and process way more. And then we're like, no, if that works, then other people compete and let's do a proper tech company. Anyway. But so after that moment, the plan was always like build software, be a software company, figure out how to productize all the stuff we're doing manually. I think realistically, we thought that would take a year or two. Honestly, it probably took 4 or 5 for various reasons. But now, like, it's a software company. I mean, it's a SaaS company, so there are CSMs, there is a support team, but it's very much a software product, software experience.
Why did it take longer than you? Were there mistakes you made?
Oh my gosh, so many, so many. Like we were so bad at hiring. Just like it took so long, and some of that's like, again, you're like 2 people working on SOC 2 in a room. Like who wants to join that? You know, like there's some of that's inevitable, but some of it was like we just like messed up a bunch of stuff. Yeah, you know, like software estimation and software engineering is like one of the world's great unsolved problems. Kind of joking, kind of serious. You know, like we just thought we'd like build much faster. There was way more complexity than we thought. The trope about like, oh, if you told me what we would have had to do, would I have started? You're like, I am glad I didn't know.
Right, right.
All of that.
Now, fast forward to today. The world has changed a little bit. We've tried to avoid saying AI for a while here, but we've made it.
We got it like almost 20 minutes.
It's almost 20 minutes, so pretty good. But that must be what your customers are thinking about right now. Is that one of the main reasons they come to you at this point, or is it becoming one? Or
I think it'll become one. So when we talk about the startups we serve, they're very driven by their customer demands, as I think they should be. As in, if their customer says you need to get a SOC 2, they get a SOC 2. And if their customer says you need to figure out what the EU AI Act is going to say and go along with that, they're going to do that. But they don't do that for fun, right? And so on the AI standards, there's the EU AI Act, there's regulation from NIST in the US, from ISO in Europe, and there's all these kind of competing like standards floating around, but it is not, like that universe hasn't cooled. It's not clear if we're going to centralize on one thing, who's going to ask for what. And so I think a lot of startups actually are in, you know, again, if you tell me I need to jump over this bar, I will. But I'm not going to do that. Again, I'm not going to do that for fun. So
not much fun to be had there, I'm sure.
Try to make it as easy as possible. You know, easy and legit as possible, I should say. But and I do think that universe will cool. Like, you know, there will be more there. I actually think when I talk to the big enterprises, especially in Europe, they're still trying to figure out how they think about this. And so once they figure that out, they will then push the requirement down on all of the software companies that do business with them, and like that's when it'll show up.
But it's extremely complicated for them now.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest mistakes they're making?
The big companies?
The big companies, or even the startups too that you're talking to. But
I think it's kind of the classic, like, I don't know, big company or like old guard mistake of trying to control more than you can, right? And just being like, oh, well, every piece of, you know, I don't know, big company data that goes into your system must be like tagged and analyzed, and you must be able to understand the data flows at any point in time. And that is like a wonderful goal, and I'm not sure, or there's probably very few companies in the world that can like make that promise 100% of the time. And so it's kind of like an expectation mismatch there. And then it just becomes about a like, well, you know, again, here's what we can, like, in the kind of the transparency to build trust, like the startup being like, well, here's what we can't meet that bar, but here's what we can do. How can we get comfortable? How can we get you comfortable with the delta? And then the big company trying to figure that out. I think also just like the big company, like who makes that decision, right?
And you mentioned trust a few times. At the end of the day, you're productizing trust. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, trying to help our customers build and maintain it. One of our company principles is do what it says on the tin, which we like have internally, but I think we try to have our relationship with our customers and our customers' relationship with their customers too. And the idea is it's kind of a Britishism, but you know, you just write out on the tin of cookie tin or whatever, like here's what's in the cookie tin, right? Here are the types of cookies, and then those cookies are in the tin, right? Does that mean, like saying what you're going to do up front and then following through on it, sort of that point.
How do you, because you have to do that yourself as well, how do you think about that
so.
for Vanta itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we think about a lot. It's really it's painful when you miss it. Like, I don't want to, say we get it right 100% of the time. We don't, and that's like always brutal. But I think it's like constantly trying, and then when we miss, trying to figure out why, like a little bit of root cause analysis, but also just a little bit of like call up the customer and figure it out. I was talking to a customer in London about a month ago, and he said something that did kind of warm my heart, which is he's like, well, yeah, Vanta doesn't always get everything right, but like when you mess it up, you try really hard to fix it and understand. You're like, okay, thank you.
Which is, I mean, especially with AI and bots, there's always a chance that something goes wrong.
Yeah, and I guess kind of maybe embedded in this is like, I think, again, while I'd love to be like, oh yes, we get things right 100% of the time, like that's just not realistic. Like that's just not what human systems do, which is, a painful reality, but a reality. And so we also try not to pretend we do that too.
Sure. Now, today, 2.45 billion, somewhere there, valuation. Has anybody ever tried to buy you?
Not really. In the very early days when it was just two founders and like basically the spreadsheets, a certain, this is also 2018, a very hypey shared office space company with a yellow and black logo. Someone there.
You can say WeWork.
Yeah,
okay.
Kind of said they would like buy us or compete with us, but it didn't make a lot of sense at the time, and so sort of ignored it. But it was even at the time, it was kind of funny, and in retrospect, it's like really funny.
Not something you regret today.
No, that one I feel great about.
Why is that? I mean, you're such a successful company. It's a successful business.
To be clear, I'm not sure it's a good thing. Like, arguably a bad thing. I think there is a bit about where we are one of those companies that is, digitizing like an older industry and or parts of an older industry and parts of an older practice. And so it's an area that pure play tech companies have not historically played in. And then the, accounting firms think about the world very differently, right? Everything is a professional service, everything is a one-off, like standardization is kind of an anathema to them. And that's kind of this funny ground where we don't quite fit with how either has historically thought about it.
Now, on the other hand, there's a bunch of, I talk to a startup every second week, I think, that wants to help people with their audits. There's a couple of larger companies. What about you making acquisitions? Because it hasn't really happened yet.
We made one almost 2 years ago now, a year and 9 months ago or so. We're constantly looking at things. Some of it's actually just to develop taste, and so that when there's something that like really fits well, we know and can act quickly on that. I think the stuff that is less interesting to us are like smaller versions of what we do. Because we like have that technology. It's much more adjacent things that are especially different technologies than we use, because then it is more clear about like, oh, you're buying this, and yes, you could build it, but like that timeline is this, and buying it is this, and it just like that's easier to reason through why it's a good decision.
Now, since nobody's buying you, your next option is to IPO at some point. I know you don't want to talk about it, but we'll talk about it for a moment. When is that coming?
No idea. If you get any rumors, let me know.
Does it matter to you?
Kind of no, in a way that I don't know if people believe me or they kind of get annoyed by that answer. But when I was at Union Square Ventures, I was really lucky and saw, they weren't Facebook investors, but that was when Facebook IPO'd, Twitter were very early investors, Twitter IPO'd. I got to see a bunch of these. And I think the thing that really struck me was everyone in the industry talks about IPO as an exit. And it is an exit for investors. And for the team and the founders, it's often not. It's often like day of confetti, lots of celebration, wake up the next day, maybe hungover, and then do your job, but harder. And then just keep doing that. And I think that, so I do kind of, I'm a little allergic to casting an IPO as an exit, again, for people who work at the company, because it's just not. It is a milestone. It's a financing milestone. It can be like a brand, like it can be lots of wonderful things, but it's not an exit.
So next year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely.
What is next, though, for you? What's top of mind? We only have about a minute left. But.
17 minutes. Okay, let's see if I can do this in like 15 seconds.
Oh, you can see I can't see.
Yeah. Burn-in time here. A couple things. I mean, Vanta has kind of these two parts of our business. There's a part that is startups and like smaller but ambitious and growing businesses, and that's often like first certification and revenue unlock, and over time building out a security program. And we think there's so much more we can and should be doing there, especially on the building security program side, actually. And then for bigger companies, we have increasingly started investing there. And while, again, 8 years ago, I thought this problem was much more of a small company thing, and big company thing, I don't know. There's actually a ton there, and these teams that are often part of security organizations doing things super manually. They know it's super manual. They don't love it, but like no one has, or there's been very few tools built for them. And so there's actually a bunch of stuff there. We're kind of thinking about the two parts of the business a little separately.
Got it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We'll talk after the IPO next year.
Can't wait. Back here.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.